This is lecture number 3 of chapter 14. In this chapter, we are doing multivariate calculus. In the previous lecture, you have learned about limit, continuity, and differentiability of a function of two variables. So let's recall some key points, in particular, the points related to the solution of problems. Let's see some points related to the solution of limit for a function of two variables. Suppose you want to show that limit of fxy as xy goes to x0, y0 is L. So what are the ways of doing it? First is you can do by definition. What is definition? Given epsilon positive, there exists delta positive such that mod of fxy minus L is less than epsilon for 0 less than mod x minus x0 less than delta, 0 less than mod y minus y0 less than delta. This is deleted neighborhood of x0, y0. So for given epsilon positive, you should be in a position to find some delta positive such that for the values of xy corresponding to this deleted neighborhood, fxy values lie in epsilon neighborhood of L. Okay, these things I have already explained you earlier. You can construct a square, circular neighborhood also. Both are fine. So this is the way to prove limit for using definition. Another way, sandwich theorem. In sandwich theorem, what you need to do first, in the neighborhood of x0, y0, establish this inequality. After that, if limit of gxy is L as x0, y0, as xy goes to x0, y0, and limit of hxy is also L, then using sandwich theorem, you can say that limit of fxy is also L. But in this case, the difficulty is you need to think these two functions. Okay. So all problems cannot be done using this. It may be very difficult to think of the functions gxy and hxy, but some problems are easier by this method. Of course, you can use this. So this method is by definition, this is by sandwich theorem. Okay. While applying the epsilon delta approach, you may need to do some manipulations for finding delta neighborhood of x0, y0. Okay. Already I have explained some problems on this. Let's see one more problem. In some problems, you may need to use polar coordinates. Let's see this problem. Show that limit of the function square root of 1 minus x square minus y square as xy goes to 0, 0 is 1. Use epsilon delta approach here. So what we need to do in the solution? We need to establish that for given epsilon positive, there exists some delta positive such that in the deleted delta neighborhood of 0, 0, the corresponding values of fxy lie in epsilon neighborhood of L. Here L is 1 and the function is square root of 1 minus x square minus y square minus 1. Let's see a new manipulation here. How can we write here? How can we write the next step to get the delta neighborhood? See this. I can rewrite this like this. I've just taken minus out because of modulus. I can write like this. Now, this can be written less than equal to 1 minus x square, sorry, 1 is here, 1 minus x square minus y square. Why? This function square root of 1 minus x square minus y square is less than equal to 1 minus x square. No, it is greater than equal to 1 minus x square minus y square. Am I right? This expression inside the square root sign is less than equal to 1 for all permissible values of xy, right? If something is less than 1 and you square, it gets bigger or smaller? It gets smaller, right? If you square, then it gets smaller. That's why this thing is greater than equal to this. So this inequality is fine. Less than equal to because of minus. So it is fine. So what do you get from this? X square plus y square. No need to put modulus also. Okay, put it here so that you can use triangle inequality. What do you get from this? This is less than equal to. Here at this step, you can use square neighborhood or circular neighborhood. Both way it's fine. So how to use the circular neighborhood first? How to use circular neighborhood? This thing is less than epsilon if square root of x square plus y square is less than root epsilon. Am I right? It is simply square of this. But what is it? X minus 0 whole square, you can write it like this, y minus 0 whole square. This is, let's assume this as delta. This is delta neighborhood of 0, 0. So you have found a delta neighborhood of 0, 0 for which mod fxy minus 1 is less than epsilon. This means limit of this function is 1. This is circular neighborhood. You could use square neighborhood also. How? By triangle inequality, this can be written as, even if you don't put mod, it's fine. Mod x square plus mod y square. Correct? This is less than equal to this. In fact, it is equal to this because it is always positive. So you can write equal to. This is less than epsilon if mod x is less than epsilon by 4, root epsilon by 4, and mod y is less than root epsilon by 4. Am I right? Or I should choose epsilon by 2. No, it's fine. Epsilon by 4 square. Okay, if I write outside, then it is 2. So I should write here 2. Square and add these two, you get epsilon, right? So choose this as delta and this also delta. So this is square neighborhood of 0, 0 for which mod fxy minus 1 is less than epsilon. So see this manipulation, okay? And doing this manipulation, you are able to prove that limit of this function as xy going to 0, 0 is 1. So hope you understand this. So it depends on the problem. And according to the problem, you have to think how to get the delta neighborhood for which fxy minus L modulus is less than epsilon. If you establish this, limit exists and is equal to L. Okay, next, the cases where limit doesn't exist. We have already done some problems. What is the way to prove that limit doesn't exist? Limit is path dependent. If you are able to show that limit is path dependent, then that limit doesn't exist. We did one problem in the previous lecture. This problem, x minus y over x plus y. Choosing the path y equal to mx. If I put y equal to mx here, then this becomes x minus mx over x plus mx. Further, if I simplify, 1 minus m over 1 plus m. Okay? So limit is path dependent. This is the path. A line passing through origin with slope m. Along this path, xy is going to 0, 0. So I see that changing the values of m means changing the values of the limit. So value of the limit is not unique. It is path dependent, so it does not exist. What I want to tell you here we have chosen the path y equal to mx. This path doesn't work in all the problems. Make a note of it. Suppose I change this problem, x square minus y over x square plus y. Many students will again use this path without thinking. Okay? If you use the same path, what happens? It is m square x square. And denominator also m square x square. What is the answer of this? What is the answer of this? Simplify further. X is not eliminated, you can see. So it is 0 by 0. And students will write the answer, limit doesn't exist. This is not correct. This is not correct. You cannot use the path this way. So change some different path, means consider some different path. Let's choose y equal to mx square. This is a parabolic path. This is also going through the origin. So if I choose y equal to mx square, then see what do you get? X square minus mx square over x square plus mx square. This time there is no problem. You are getting some expression in m. It depends on m. So limit is path dependent and this limit does not exist. 0 by 0 is not telling anything, okay? Don't use that. It means your path is not correct, okay? So take care of this. Regarding continuity, if you know how to solve limits, it's very simple to do the problems of continuity. Continuity means the function is continuous at x0, y0 if limit of fxy as xy goes to x0, y0 is equal to the value of the function. So same methods of limit you can apply. The only difference is there the L is replaced by the value of the function. Okay. So this is fine. Next, differentiability. In the previous lecture, I explained you the definition of differentiability of a function of two variables. Here just I want to tell you some key points that how to check differentiability of a function. There are two ways. One, by definition, means change in fxy around the point xy, means this. Should be expressed in the form a times delta x plus b times delta y plus delta x times some function phi plus delta y times some function of psi, where phi psi are functions of delta x delta y both tend to 0 as delta x delta y tend to 0. So to prove the differentiability of a function at xy, you have to do this. This is one approach. If you are able to express the change in f around xy in this form, you can say the function is differentiable at xy. Other approach, show that fx and fy are continuous at whatever point you are checking the differentiability or at xy. The partial derivatives of f with respect to x and y are continuous. If you are able to show this, then also you can say the function is differentiable at x0, y0. So depending on the problem, you can choose either route. Usually you will be asked the differentiability at a point. So I think you can use either of the two easily. See this problem. fxy equal to x square plus y square. This problem we did in the previous lecture. We showed that this function is differentiable at xy by choosing this approach. Do you recall that? Can you use the second approach? Fx is what? Partial derivative with respect to x. So you get 2x, fy, 2y. These are polynomials at x and y, and you know polynomials are always continuous. So what can you say from the second approach? The function is differentiable. Okay, so this is in fact the sufficient condition for differentiability. Do you recall the necessary condition? The partial derivatives, you know, these a and b are partial derivatives. So these must exist. Okay, we will use the necessary condition for disproving the differentiability. Not differentiable, how can you check in a given problem? The function is not differentiable. Check whether fx exists. If fx does not exist, you need not to do anything further. You can directly say the function is not differentiable. Similarly, if fy doesn't exist, again you can say the function is not differentiable because these are necessary conditions. You check either of the two, no problem. There is one more. If you are able to check that function is not continuous, then also you can say that the function is not differentiable. So any of the three you can use for disproving the differentiability. Okay, so whichever is suitable to you, you can do that. There are other ways also, but these are the simple ways for proving that the function is not differentiable. Now recall the partial derivatives definitions. Partial derivative with respect to x denoted by f subscript x or partial f over partial x. Any of these two symbols can be used. What is it? Recall the limit definition. Limit h tending to 0, fx plus h, comma y minus fxy divided by h. Same way, recall the partial derivative of f with respect to y at any point xy. What is it? Limit k going to 0, fx comma y plus k minus fxy divided by k. Always remember these two definitions for partial derivatives. One very important thing regarding calculation of partial derivatives. See this problem that we did in the previous lecture. fxy is given by xy over x square plus y square when xy non-zero and 0 when xy is 0. Suppose you are asked to find partial derivative of f with respect to x at 0, 0 and fy also at 0, 0. A common mistake that is done by students, I should tell you that mistake. Students think that let me differentiate it directly with respect to x. By applying the quotient rule, what is partial derivative with respect to x? Treat y as constant. So you get x square plus y square whole square, denominator whole square, denominator as it is. Partial derivative of xy with respect to x is y minus xy as it is. Partial derivative of the denominator with respect to x is 2x. After that, because the partial derivative is required at 0, 0, they write that it is 0 over 0 does not exist. 0 over 0 has no meaning, right? Indeterminate form does not exist. This is wrong. This procedure is wrong. You know that this partial derivative exists. If you go by definition, what do you get? Use this definition. Here your xy are 0, 0. So by definition it is fh comma 0 minus f0, 0 divided by h. fh 0, you can calculate from here, it is 0. 0 minus 0 over h. So answer of this limit is 0. Partial derivative exists and it is equal to 0. Now what is wrong here? This function is valid only for this, or okay, this expression of the function is valid only for xy non-zero. But you are trying here 0, 0. Correct? That's why this is wrong. Don't do this. Especially at the point where the function is defined differently in the neighborhood. At 0, 0, its value is 0. At non-zero, it is given by this. Let me remind you, in 12th standard, you have done problems of this type. Suppose a function is given by x when x is less than or equal to 1, x plus 1 when x is greater than 1. How do you check its continuity at 1? Less than 1, you are sure that function is this, a polynomial continuous. Greater than 1 also no problem. But at 1, you don't do like that. You don't say both are polynomials or continuous. You find left hand limit at 1, that is 1, and right hand limit at 1 is 2, not equal. Function is not continuous at 1. So you understand this bifurcation point, okay? At these points, you have to do by limit definition. Same problem, if I ask you find fx at 1, 1, it's fine. You can use this formula. In this, you can put x equal to 1, y equal to 1, and you can see it's well defined. But not at 0, 0. So be careful about it. All right, so I have told you the approaches for solving problems on limits, continuity, and differentiability of a function of two variables and partial derivatives as well. Now, next is chain rule. Hope you recall chain rule in the one variable case. Means, suppose f is a function of x and x is a function of t. F is a function of single variable x. Suppose x is further function of t. Of course, f is differentiable function of x and x is differentiable function of t. Then chain rule says that derivative of f with respect to t is equal to df over dx into dx over dt. You are familiar with this. In case of a function of two variables, it extends similarly. Suppose f is a differentiable function of xy. Xy are further functions of a variable t. So you can say f is a composite function of t. So how can I write df over dt using the chain rule? So you see, from f to t, you have two possible paths, f to x, x to t, f to y, y to t. You have to exhaust both the paths, f to x, x to t, f to y, y to t. So partial f over partial x into dx over dt for the first path. Second path, partial f over partial y into dy over dt. Here I am using partial derivatives. Why? Because f depends on more than one variable. But for this, I am using total derivative. Reason is that x depends on single variable. When dependence is on single variable, it's ordinary derivative. Dependence is on more than one, use partial derivatives. Here total derivative because f with respect to t, finally f depends on single variable. That's why total derivative. It can be proved easily, but we will not do the proof. Okay, just accept this result. Think like this. This is extended to the case of two variables. Similarly, you can write chain rule for this kind of situation. Suppose x is a function of x, y, z, and x, y, z are further functions of t. Of course, f is differentiable function of x, y, z, and x, y, z are differentiable functions of t. Then, how can you write df over dt? Think over it. This time there are three possible paths from f to t, f to x, x to t, f to y, y to t, f to z, z to t. Use these paths. Partial f over partial x into dx over dt, partial f over partial y into dy over dt, plus partial f over partial z into dz over dt. Easy, just one term is extended. These are called tree diagrams. Tree diagrams. So if you make such a diagram, then it's easy to write the rule of differentiation. See one more situation. Suppose f is differentiable function of x, y, z, and x, y, z are further differentiable functions of u, v, w. Now, f is finally a function of the three variables u, v, w. Now I cannot write total derivative of f with respect to u, v, w. What I can write? Partial derivative of f with respect to u. But from f to u, there are three paths. F to x, x to u, then f to y, y to u, and then f to z, z to u. You have to explore all these paths. Okay, so partial f over partial x into partial x over partial u plus partial f over partial y into partial y over partial u plus partial f over partial z into partial z over partial u. Is partial. Okay. Everywhere partial this time. Why? There's no total derivative in the whole expression. F depends on x, y, z. Dependence is on more than one variable. Here also, further x, y, z also depend on three variables. Finally, f also depends on three variables. So you have written partial derivative of f with respect to u using this chain rule. Same way you can write yourself partial f over partial v. Here in place of u, you will get v. Similarly, you can write partial derivative of f with respect to w. Okay, so I hope you understand how to write derivative of a function using chain rule. Now let's do some problems. It is very easy. You can apply all the problems easily. Suppose fxy is x into y, x is cos t, and y is sin t. Find df over dt. See, f is a function of xy clearly, and xy are further functions of t. So how to get df over dt? First write the rule using this tree diagram. Partial f over partial x into dx over dt plus partial f over partial y, this path, second path, dy over dt. What is partial f over partial x from here? Treat y as constant. So you get y, differentiating with respect to x, treating y constant. Dx over dt minus sin t plus partial f over partial y means x, dy over dt means cos t. The answer is mixed in x, y, t. I need finally in terms of t. So replace your x, y values in t. What do you get? Y is sine t. So here you get minus sine t into sine t. That means sine square t. And cos t into cos t. Cos square t. You can write it cos 2t if you like. Okay. So this is how you can use the chain rule. Next problem, very interesting. This will test your brain. Suppose z is a function of xyz and f is a function of x minus y, y minus z, z minus x. In this expression, the terms are in the form x minus y, y minus z, z minus x. Overall, it is a function of xyz. If gxyz is this, then show that partial g over partial x plus partial g over partial y plus partial g over partial z is 0. How can you do this? Think over it. Think over it. How can you do it? Let p equal to x minus y. I am assuming new variables in places of these arguments. P equal to x minus y, q equal to y minus z, and r equal to z minus x. Correct? Then what happens? G becomes function of PQR, correct? Because in these places I have assumed PQR. So G becomes a function of PQR, and PQR are further functions of XYZ, you can see. Correct? Somebody may think Z is not here, okay? Feel happy, right here 0 into Z. So PQR are functions of XYZ. What do you need first up? Partial G over partial X? Partial derivative of G with respect to X. So how many paths? 3 paths, G to P, P to X, likewise G to Q, Q to X, and G to R, R to X. Okay, use the chain rule. Partial G over partial P into partial P over partial X plus partial G over partial Q into partial Q over partial X plus partial G over partial R into partial R over partial X. This we cannot simplify because G is not given to us. It is given in general form. But partial P over partial X we can calculate. It is 1. This derivative is 1. And partial Q over partial X, 0. You can see. And partial R over partial X, this is minus 1. Okay. Similarly, you can calculate partial G over partial Y, partial G over partial Z. And finally, add all the 3, you will get 0. You can understand the symmetry. What will you get in the next? Partial G over partial P into partial P over partial Y, you will get minus partial G over partial P. Okay, so with symmetry, you will find that addition of the 3 is 0. Okay, you can check yourself. Writing similar rule, calculating these derivatives, partial derivatives, substituting, adding the 3, you will get 0. Okay, so this is the trick here. Notice it. We introduced 3 more variables in order to use the chain rule. Next, implicit differentiation. Already you have done in your 12th standard. Implicit differentiation means If you are given some implicit relation in xy, say like this, and you are asked to find dy by dx from it, how you do it? You differentiate both sides with respect to x, write like this 2x, differentiate this product also, so x as it is dy by dx plus y as it is, derivative of x with respect to x is 1, right hand side derivative is 0 with respect to x. So from this, what is dy by dx? It is minus y plus 2x over x. Okay. Now we will get implicit differentiation using partial derivatives. You will see that it is much easier than this one. So suppose some implicit relation between xy is given to you. So think like this: f is a function of xy clearly, and through this relation, y can also be assumed as function of x. X is of course function of x. So f is a function of x this way. So what is df over dx using chain rule? Two parts, f2x, x2x. So you can write partial f over partial x into dx over dx plus partial f over partial y into dy by dx. Because f is given as constant, left hand side is 0. Let's write it in short notations. This is fx, dx over dx is 1 plus fy dy by dx. From this, you have the formula for dy by dx in terms of partial derivatives of f minus fx over fy. Very useful formula. Let us do this problem using this one. See whether we get the same answer. This is your fxy, correct? Xy equal to this. So what is dy by dx using the partial derivatives? Minus fx means partial derivative with respect to x. So what do we get? 2x plus y divided by fy means partial derivative with respect to y. What is it? X. So you can check both answers are same. Okay. So this is the formula for implicit differentiation for dy by dx from an implicit relation. You will be thinking that it's a very simple problem. What is the need to use partial derivatives? Let me write another problem, then you'll understand its importance. Find dy by dx from the implicit relation x power y plus y power x equal to 1. How you did it in your 11th class or 12th class? Do you recall it? You assumed it u, it as v, then you took logarithm on both sides. Means you differentiated this first, du by dx plus dv by dx equal to 0. After that, you find du by dx separately from this u equal to x power y. Taking logarithm and all that, okay? You know that process. It's a very lengthy solution. But using this approach, you can directly write its answer. See how. What is f in this problem? fxy. X power y plus y power x. 1 doesn't matter because you're going to differentiate. Or you can write if you want to write. This is your f. So use it here to get your answer. So partial derivative of this function with respect to x is what? Treat y as constant. So y minus y x power y minus 1, just like you do for x power n x power n minus 1. What is derivative of y power x with respect to x? Y power x ln y. Am I right? Same way you can do derivative of f with respect to y, partial derivative with respect to y. So what do we get? X power y ln x. This time you will treat x as constant. So x power y ln x plus x times y power x minus 1. You see, within single step you have written the answer, but there you did many steps to get to this answer. Okay, so you should know this formula for dy by dx from an implicit relation in xy. Let me write one more problem on this. X cube plus z square plus y e power xz plus z times cos y equal to 0. This is implicit relation in x, y, z. From this, find partial z over partial x, or you can say zx. How can we do this? If I assume this whole expression as fxyz, function of xyz, so I can write minus fx over fz for finding this, isn't it? Minus fx over fz. Similar rule as you did for dy by dx. So what is fx from it? When you do fx, then y and z are constants. So what do you get? 3x square plus y and z are constants. You are differentiating with respect to x. So yz e power xz and its derivative is 0 with respect to x, divided by partial derivative with respect to z. So derivative of x cube is 0, z square derivative is 2z plus y with respect to z you are doing, so it is y x times e power xz plus cos y. You understand? Plus cos y. Same way, if I ask you find zy, you can calculate. Okay, so doing such problems is easier. Next thing, higher order partial derivatives. Higher order partial derivatives. Very important. For a given function fxy, you already know fx and fy. Fx means partial f over partial x, and you know by definition it is limit h going to 0, fx plus h comma y minus fxy divided by h. Similarly, you know partial derivative of f with respect to y. So these are first order partial derivatives. Okay, these are first order. Let me write partial f over partial y also. X comma y plus k this time minus fxy over k. If I differentiate it further with respect to x or y, this fx, you know, is again a function of xy. When we differentiate a function partially with respect to x, again it could be a function of xy. So it means it can be further differentiated partially either with respect to x or with respect to y. Okay. So if we differentiate further with respect to x, let's say, how we denote it? We denote it by this notation. I'm differentiating this expression. Okay. This notation or f double x notation, and this also can be written as del 2f over del x squared. All are okay. Equal to what happens this side? Now your function f had changed to fx. So here in the limit, change f to fx. That's all. F has gone to fx, and further you are doing partial derivative, so you can do like this. If I differentiate this expression with respect to y, partially with respect to y, then one notation is that you can write it del 2f over, or partial 2f over partial y partial x. Other notation is fxy, means first partially differentiate with respect to x and then with respect to y. In limit, what happens? F has gone to fx, but now you are differentiating partially with respect to y, so use this one. The increment in y, not in x. So x comma y plus k minus fx xy divided by k. F has gone to fx. You understand this, both places. But now the partial derivative is with respect to y. So I've taken an increment in y. So you understand how the limit definition is changing. Okay, same way you can define, this is fxy, same way you can define fyx. This time order is different. This is partial 2f over partial x partial y. Means first differentiate with respect to y, then with respect to x. And one more, f double y. F double y means 2 times partial derivative with respect to y. So for a function of two variables, there are 4 second order partial derivatives, f double x, fxy, fyx, and f double y. And there are 2 first order partial derivatives, fx and fy. Now you understand, similarly, if I write fxyx, what does it mean? First differentiate partially with respect to x, then with respect to y, and then again with respect to x. So that way you can get further higher order partial derivatives. So you got the definitions, right? The notations and the limit definitions. You may need limit definitions also. I will give one example. All right, we can move further. Take some problems on higher order partial derivatives. Suppose fxy is x cube plus x square y square plus y cube. What are first order partial derivatives? 3x square, fx is 3x square plus 2xy square. You are treating y as constant, so this is the derivative with respect to x. Fy, this time x is constant throughout, so you get 2x square y plus 3y square. Further differentiation, these are first order partial derivatives. Further differentiation, suppose I want to write f double x. Differentiate it again with respect to x, so you get 6x plus 2y square. Then, if I differentiate this with respect to y, then it is fxy. What do we get? 4xy. Now, if I differentiate fy with respect to x, what do I get? fyx. fyx means differentiating this with respect to x. Again, I get 4xy, you can see. And then f double y. What is f double y? F double y is differentiate this again with respect to y. So 2x square plus 6y. Got it? So it's very easy to calculate higher order partial derivatives. Notice one thing. fxy and fyx both are same. Does it mean that order doesn't matter? Whatever way you differentiate, first with respect to x or first with respect to y? Order matters or not? This is the question now. Yes, order matters. See this problem. See this problem carefully. This will also tell you how to use limits for finding higher order partial derivatives. Suppose fxy is xy into x square minus y square over x square plus y square when xy is non-zero and 0 when xy equal to 0, 0. Okay. For this problem, for this function, you need to find fxy at 0, 0 and fyx at 0, 0. Let's see how we do it. Second order partial derivatives I need at 0, 0. So you know its limit definition involves partial derivative of fx you use in the limit and then you differentiate with respect to y, right? First with respect to x, then with respect to y. So by definition, what is fxy at 0, 0? So fy h comma 0 minus fy at 0, 0 divided by h, limit h tends to 0. Is it right or not? First, you need to differentiate with respect to x. Sorry, it should be x here. But then with respect to y, so still it is not correct. I need to change it. Let me write it here. fxy at 0, 0 means what? Limit. First you differentiate with respect to x. It means your function is fx, okay, in the limit. Then you are differentiating with respect to y. That means limit k tending to 0. Okay, we go left to right. So differentiating with respect to y means you will take increment in the second argument, 0k minus fx at 0, 0 divided by k. So if you are able to find these two, then you can get the value of this derivative. It means first you need first order derivatives, one at 0, 0, other at 0k. Okay, let's find both these. Fx at 0, 0 means what? Limit h going to 0. Partial derivative with respect to x means increment is in the first argument, comma 0 minus f0, 0 divided by h. What is f at 0 from this? F at 0 from this. Hmm? 0, clearly. 0 minus f0, 0 is also 0 divided by h. So you get 0. Fine. Next thing that you need is fx at 0k. This time be careful. Your point is 0k, it's not 0, 0. So same limit h going to 0. Increment in first argument. But second argument is not 0, it is k. So in place of 0, you have to write k here, minus. In place of 0, 0, it is 0k divided by h. Simplify it. See what we get. fhk means this whole expression, replacing x by h, y by k. So h square minus k square divided by h square plus k square. This is the expression for fhk. f0k, you calculate f0k from this, it is 0. Okay. Divided by h. So this h is cancelled. What is next? H is cancelled and H is going to 0 further. So what is left in the numerator? Minus k cube and denominator k square. So it is minus k. Am I right? It is minus k. H is cancelled. After that, you apply the limit h going to 0. So minus k cube over k square. So minus k. So now you can replace the values here in this limit. Fx at 0k is minus k. And fx at 0, 0, we have found 0 divided by k. What do we get? Minus 1. Fxy at 0, 0 is minus 1. Same procedure you can follow for fyx at 0, 0. You know what will you get? This is minus 1. This you will get as plus 1. It means order matters because these are different. So now I tell you the criteria which can be used to say that when order doesn't matter. If the two partial derivatives fxy and fyx are continuous, these are continuous, then these are equal. In the previous example, we were finding these 4xy equal to 4xy. In that example, you can clearly see that these partial derivatives are continuous. That's why order doesn't matter. In most of the problems given in your textbook, the order doesn't matter because you are dealing with mostly with continuous functions. Okay, these are continuous there, but in this problem, these are not continuous. It can be checked further, okay, using the limits. But from this example, you have understood that order doesn't matter. Secondly, you have also learned how to find higher order partial derivatives at a given point using the limits. All right. Okay. So we are done for this lecture. Now we will meet in the next lecture. Thank you.